Hey, what's up everybody? I'd like to welcome you to another Juice tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to go a little bit deeper into the slider class and also the SliderListener class, which allows us to broadcast changes that we make in slider values to maybe other sliders or to any other parameters that we want to be affected when we're actually moving a slider or moving a dial. We're also going to talk a little bit about the label class, which allows us to put titles to our sliders. And we're just going to combine all three of those things and just get into it. Okay, so as always, we're going to just start up a new project. Just open up our producer. And once again, we're going to be doing a GUI application because we're working with the GUI. I'll just call this slider tutorial 1. Just throw this in the development folder. Okay. And here we are back in Juce again. This derives from the Juce tutorial that you'll find on their website covering the slider class. So I encourage you to go and check that out if you haven't already. So we're just going to go ahead and open this up in the Xcode. I'm going to be referring to the API quite a bit for this one because rather than just going through the functions and just showing you kind of what I've done for practice, I think it'd be a little bit better if we just kind of go through it step by step and really just think about, well, why are we adding these things, and just really thinking the process through. That's what I find to be most helpful. So here we have our main.cpp, which just gives us our basic Juce functionality, and then our main component, which manages our GUI. Okay, so here we're just going to create a couple sliders. Okay, and we're going to be doing that using the slider class. So I'll just call this slider, and we're going to create one that's going to be called the frequency. So we'll call it the frequency slider. Then we're going to create a duration slider for time. And what we'll be doing a little bit later is we're going to basically link these two up. So when you move one dial, it controls what the other slider is doing. Okay. So one thing that I've maybe I knew it, but I didn't kind of consciously realize it, is that for a component to be a child component of, like in this case, our main component, you don't have to necessarily set up your own class in order for that to happen. Okay, so we'll see that as we go into it here, in that now we're just going to add this child component to the slider as a child component to our main content component. Okay, so we'll just do our add and make visible function here, and we'll do frequency slider. Okay, and now we're going to use a couple functions within the slider class. Okay, so frequency slider, if we're thinking about what we need those numbers to look like, let me just go into the slider class here. Okay, so we need to set, we don't know what the maximum and minimum numbers are for the slider that we have at the moment, so we need to go ahead and set those. Okay, so let's go to this function that we have called set range. Okay, so we're just setting the new slider range. Okay, so we got frequency sliders dot set range. Okay, we're gonna go from 50 to 5,000. Okay, so we've just taken the slider there and we've just set the range from 50 to 5,000. Okay, and then we can do frequency slider. Autocomplete, come on, man. Text. Oh boy, hope I don't have to start again. So let's see how we can add set text value suffix. Okay, so that means that we can set it to set a string to define what the value of our numbers is. In this case, it'll be hertz. Okay, so text value suffix. Okay, and that's just a string, as you can see here. Okay, and we'll just set that to hertz. Okay, nothing really mind-blowing going on just yet. Okay, I'm just gonna move all this stuff, get rid of it. Okay, and then now, don't want to get rid of that. Okay, we'll just set the bounds on this real quick. So we've got frequency slider, set bounds. Okay, what I'll do is I'll actually make a border here. So this is just like kind of roughly following from the tutorial that we have on the Juce website. So constant border equals 120. So we'll just set that so it's 120 pixels in. Okay, what have I done here? Oh yeah, just wants some numbers here. So we got border, we'll set it 20, so it's 120 pixels on the x-axis, 20 pixels on the y-axis. Then we'll do get width minus border for the how far it's going to go. And then just 20 again. Okay, and let's see if it shows up. So we're just going to compile here. It's working, it's working. I would edit these, but you know, I'd like to go straight through, so we you know, so we can just like kind of follow along, you know, see the points where we're just kind of getting stuck and work our way through it. So there we have our slider. Okay, so as you can see, it has our range from 50 hertz to 5,000 hertz, and this is our slider. Okay, great. So now we have another class that we can use to, wouldn't it be nice if we could just put a string next to it that says frequency? I think that would be nice. So what we could do is we can use what's called the label class for this. So if I go into the label class, okay, so here we got, let's go down and let's see what we, so we're going to need this function, attached to component. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a minute. So we want one where we're going to set the actual text. Okay, was it at the top? Set text. Okay, so first we need a label object. Okay, so just to keep things neat, we'll put this here. We got label. We'll just call this frequency label. Okay, and then we'll while we're here, we'll just set a label for the duration as well. When we come back and we create that a little bit later. Okay, so now we want, we need to add it and make it visible. So frequency label. Okay, then let's go back to our API, see what we need. So we got set text. So frequency label, set text. Okay, just wants a string there. So we'll just call this frequency. Okay, now notification type. What this means is if you were making like a change in this string during while you were running the app, would you want it to send a notification to, maybe somewhere else to let it know, hey, I've changed what these letters are. Okay, if we look in here, we can see our options. Okay, have a couple different ones here. What we want is don't send notification. We don't need it to send a notification because we're not going to be changing that string. Okay. Okay. So now we have the slider itself. We have a label, but now we need to attach the slider to the label. Okay. It doesn't know where it needs to be drawn at yet. Okay. So we do that using the attach to label function. So we got frequency label, attach to component. Okay. And so as you can see, it's looking for a pointer here. So we're just going to point it towards the frequency slider. Okay. Okay. Boolean on left. Okay. So if this is true, then the string will appear to the left of the box. If it's false, then it'll appear above the box. And so we want this to be true. Okay. So if we recompile now, let's see what happens. Okay, so here we go. So now we have a nice little label here for our frequency. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that again. Same thing for the duration that we've created. Okay, just same type of stuff. So do add and make visible. Okay, duration, slider. Okay, slider, set range. I don't know if I need to do this. I'm just gonna. Oh yes, that's right. Because okay, so frequency equals 1 over the duration. Okay, so basically, if we just input that formula in here, I'll go and I'll explain this a little bit further once we get it all set up. Okay, so okay, so what we're saying here is we have a formula which is frequency equals 1 over the duration. Okay. And so what we're going to do once we link these two sliders up is we want one to control the other. So when we're controlling the frequency, it'll be showing how long the duration of that wave would be if that wave were to just play, which would be like hundredths or possibly thousandths of a second long. Okay. So it'd be so short you wouldn't even register it probably. So what we're doing here is we're just taking that formula and we're just applying that here in our range. Okay, so we're going to do one over frequency slider dot get minimum. So we're just taking that formula that we know, and we're just using that to so that later on we can go and we can link those two sliders up, and one will control the other. And you can see that if our frequency is 500 hertz, well, we'll be able to see how long that wave would actually play if we were just going to play it, which would be like hundredths of a second, possibly thousands of a second long. Okay. Okay, great. So now we just need to place it on our GUI. So we got duration, slider, set the bounds. Okay. We're just going to go with the border again. Okay, we'll put it 50 pixels down. We got get width. Oh, minus border. Then 50 pixels down again. Okay, and while we're here, we should just do the rest of our stuff. Let's not skip around, eh? So we got duration slider, set text. So we're just going to set the seconds. So we'll just put an S there. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and make our label as well. So we've already created our label object called duration label. Okay. We're just going to make that visible now. And now we just need to define some parameters for that. Okay. So frequency label, set text. And this will be duration. And what have I done wrong here? Don't. Now we're good. We're good. Okay. And we're going to just attach it to our duration component. Okay. So we got attached to component. Okay. Wants us to point it towards something here. So we're just going to point it towards the duration slider. Okay. And we want it to the left of the slide of the box itself. So we're just going to set this to true again. Okay, now if we compile, then we should have the both sliders. Okay, but we haven't. Okay, oh, that's because I've said frequency label here instead of duration label. Okay, so it's overwritten. It's written duration over top of our frequency. So we just need to change this to duration. Great. Okay, so. Okay, so here we go. So now we have two sliders. We have our frequency slider, we have our duration slider. Okay, but when I'm moving one, it's not affecting the other. Okay, so we need to change that. Okay, so the way that we change this, and this is where things might get a little bit kind of confusing to wrap your head around a little bit, but just follow me and listen to a couple times if you get confused. So we have another class. Okay, it's called SliderListener. Okay, and so what this does is this allows us, when we're making changes to one of the sliders and we need another slider or a parameter to react to the changes that are being made in the slider, we need this class. Okay, so we need to be able to add this functionality into our into our class. Okay, so the way that we're going to do that, we're just going to put comma here, and we're just adding SliderListener as another base class. Okay, so that's just another base class that's going to give us the functionality within our main content component. Okay. So now we have that. Now, if we go into our SliderListener class, okay, not really a whole lot here, okay. Now, what we see is we see a virtual function, okay, and we see that it says equals 0, okay, and what this means is that it's a pure virtual function, which means that we need to, in order for this to work, we need to overwrite. We need to do an override and define what we want to happen when the slider value is changed. Okay, so anytime that you see this equals 0, that means it's a pure virtual function of an abstract class. So like if I just tried to, let's just say that I just tried to run this right now. Okay. So it says failed, okay? It says allocating an object of abstract class type, okay? And what that means is that we've got an abstract class, which is this SliderListener, okay? And it's saying that something hasn't been defined. There's a pure virtual function that needs to be defined in here, okay? So we're just going to do that now. Okay, and we'll just use void slider value changed. Void slider value changed. Unfortunately, it doesn't autocorrect when we're doing this. Okay. And now we just need to define what happens when we move one slider. Well, what's going to happen? What's going to actually change? So if we go if slider equals and so as you can see, we need a pointer to a slider here. So we're going to go and frequency slider. Okay. Then what we want to happen is when we change the frequency slider, we want the duration to be changed. Okay, with it. Okay, so we got. So we're going to go duration slider dot set value. Okay, and we're just making that the reciprocal of the frequency. So the duration slider is just 1 over. So the duration slider is 1 over the frequency slider's value. Okay. So we need the value of that. So we're just going to do get value. Okay. But if we move the duration slider, we need the frequency slider to change. Okay. So we need an else if here. Slider equals ampersand duration slider. Then we just need to do the same kind of thing, but just for the frequency slider. So frequency slider dot set value 1.0 over duration slider get value. Okay, so we're just getting the value of the duration slider or of the frequency slider, and we're using that to define where the other slider is going to be. Okay, now we see this little kind of warning sign here. Okay, the reason that that's a warning sign is because so we're overriding a pure virtual function that's coming from the slider listener class. So we just need to actually put that there. So we just need to put override. It'll still compile, but it's just good practice to have the override there. So that's just letting anybody that's reading the code know, hey, we're overriding a class. We're overriding a function from one of the classes that we're adding the functionality from. Okay. So we've created our function. We've created our function now. So now what we need to do is we need to actually tell the component, the content component, to listen for any changes that are happening in either one of our sliders. Okay, and so what we're going to do here, if we go back into our slider listener class, where am I here? Well, I think it's actually from the slider class. So let's go slider. Okay, here we are. Okay, and we need, I think it's called add listener. Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to add a listen. We need to add what's called a listener to our component. Okay, because what's happening is that our slider is going to be changing value, but how does it know? How does one thing know when the other thing is changing the value? Okay, so I believe we're going to go frequency slider dot add listener, and then this. Okay, this meaning the main content component. Okay, the main so when anytime that we're making a change in the frequency slider, that is registering to the main content component. Okay, that's what we mean by this. Okay, and we're just going to do the same thing here for duration slider. Okay, man, I hope this works. If not, I'm in trouble. Okay, succeeded. Good news so far. Okay. Ah, there we go. So when I'm making changes in the frequency slider, it is making the changes in the duration slider as well, and vice versa. Okay. But we see a couple things. We see a couple things that we need to kind of fix to make this a little bit more usable. Okay, first thing, if you look at when I first open up the program, you'll see that both values are at 0, or both values are at their minimum, should I say. And then when I click on this, it jumps up to that value. Okay, so let's just try to kind of do something about that. Okay, so we can just set an initial value for the frequency slider. So we could do frequency slider set value, and let's just make it 500. Let's see if that fixes things. Okay, yeah, and you can see that fixed it. So both of those, so the frequency slider jumped to 500, and then the duration jumped to immediately to its corresponding value once the program opened. Okay, but one thing that we'll see as well is that, okay, if for all my audio people here, if you look at this slider for frequency, okay, let's just imagine that this is like a filter, let's say. And anybody that's designed a filter before knows that normally when you design one, you want the values to be logarithmic. Okay, so for example, if I just go to 500, okay, look at how far along the slider I am. Just I've just made a very small change, and I'm at 500 hertz already. Okay, anybody that's done any sort of production knows that you're going to be making a lot of frequency changes between 20 hertz and 500. So we need this range to be a little bit more usable. We need it to be a logarithmic range. Okay, so we can use that. We could do that using so I believe it's a frequency slider set. It's called set skew. So we're skewing the value. Okay. So set skew factor from midpoint. Okay, what that means is we're going to basically skew the values of the slider to make it a little bit more logarithmic by setting a value that's going to be the midpoint of our slider. Okay, so in this case, we'll just make 500 our midpoint. Should make it like a floating point value. So let's just do that quick. Okay. So now we have 500. So now this value between the minimum value and the midpoint of the slider is now 500 hertz. Then 500 hertz to 5,000 hertz is covered by the latter half of the slider. Okay, so that makes it a little bit more intuitive for any producers, sound engineers, so on and so forth. If we were making like a filter basically. Okay, so we're just going to do the same thing for the duration here, because as you can see, the duration isn't very intuitive either. Okay, so I've got this range so now we're like about 60% through, but look at how crazy, how minimal our value is in the duration. Okay, and then it just we need that to be a little bit more intuitive. So we'll just do the same thing for the duration, slider. Set. Okay, and we'll just set that to 0.002. Okay, I'm just getting the numbers from the tutorial, from the Juce website. Obviously, if we were doing this a little bit, if we were doing this on the fly, it would take us obviously a little bit longer to get, the best numbers for this. Okay, and so as we can see, now the sliders are very intuitive. When I'm getting to the maximum value on the first slider, second slider is getting towards the minimum, and then vice versa. Okay, and then we'll just do one other one here that I saw in the tutorial, which was setting the text box style. So we can actually, if we just recompile quickly here, we'll see that these values, it's actually not that bad, but we can, if you look at the duration right now, it's a really long number there, but that we just got like this little ... showing, okay, well, the numbers that we have are too big for our text box here. So we're just going to try to fix that. So we got, so we'll just do frequency, set text box style, frequency slider, set text box style. Okay, so first thing is where we want the actual text box to be. So we'll do slider left, I think it's text box left. Yeah. So if it's read only, yeah. So so that's if we wanted to be able to actually just input text into the box itself, if it would jump straight to that value. So we'll just make that false. Okay, then we just need the text box width. We'll just put 120. Text box height, we can just make it the same as what it is as the default value. So we got frequency slider, get text box height. Okay, we'll just do the same thing for the duration slider. Text box style, so we'll do slider, text box left. We got this false, so we can just type values in there if we want to. 120 pixels long. Then we got duration slider. And then we're just going to get the text box height again. Okay. Let's just see how that looks for us. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Yeah, so it shows the whole value rather than having that little ... there. So if we wanted to get the exact value. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed it, please do what you got to do, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for listening.